So what is wrong with England's attack? Why are they unable to create chances? They have a lot of talent in the forward line and in the attacking midfield positions, but they didn't really create many chances versus Croatia or Scotland. So why is that happening? What do England need to do to make this happen? Do they need to make some personnel changes, or do they just need to change their strategy? So first of all, we're going to have a look at why they were unable to do that against Scotland. What were some of the things that Scotland did to prevent England from getting into these positions to score? And what else were England doing themselves that caused them problems? So I've put the formation out here. We've got Stones and Mings at the back with Rice in front of them. Now, Rice and Phillips are traditionally two defensive midfielders. I'd say that Phillips can carry the ball better and he can work the ball a little bit better in certain spaces. However, they're both by default quite defensive players. They like to just sit back and or hunt the ball down. They're not progressive players with the ball so much. So this is one of the problems England have. So when the ball came into Declan Rice in these situations, Billy Gilmour would look to press him a little bit, as so would Shea Adams. He'd look to cut off the passing lane. So what would end up happening is Rice would end up going backwards, or in some cases, you just play the ball safe out wide to Shaw. But this caused a lot of problems for England because they weren't able to play through the middle as much. When you want to have some dynamism in your team, you need to pass the ball through all different situations. You need to be able to play in triangular motions out wide. You need to be able to play the ball into the centre, where your attacking midfielders can draw out defensive players and create more passing lanes. England weren't really able to do this because they were not really able to find these passes into Mount or on the other side into Foden in these areas, which can then drag out the centre back on either side or displace the centre midfielders in sub situations. England weren't really able to get in behind these defensive lines for Scotland, which caused some problems. And the reason they weren't able to do that is because Declan Rice lacks the dynamism to really play the passes into here. He doesn't feel confident, so Mount comes short here, but McGregor's close to him. So rather than pass the ball into Mount here to try to create some movement, he'd opt for the safer pass towards Tyrone Mings or back into here to John Stones or maybe out wide to James or Shaw. So he'd look to play the safe pass. Phillips is asked to get a little bit more forward and join the attack in some instances, but there wasn't really many occasions where he was able to face up the Scotland defence. He'd either have McGinn or McGregor in front of him. And Phillips is not the type of player who will go past a midfielder and displace them. So if he gets past McGinn in these situations, it opens things up. And England can then start to look at maybe one or two options for a pass. But that never really happened because Phillips lacks that ability to take on players. So rather than that, again, England are forced to go wide, and then they're probably more likely than not forced to go backwards and regurgitate possession and go around the other side and try to work more angles. But England spent a lot of time trying to do that in the game without really getting anywhere. So it's something they want to look at. So when Rice or Phillips were getting into these sort of positions, looking to create passing angles, what would normally happen is Adams would press in this area here. McGregor would just shut off the passing lane. Foden may be here or he may come out wide as well, but that would mean that Rice would just go back here. Now, what Scotland did very cleverly is they just shifted across every time. They shifted across just to make sure that they had numbers in these areas, preventing England from being able to actually find any sort of pass. Robertson will push in here as well to crowd out Foden. So even if Stones does find James in this situation, James is faced up by McGinn or Gilmour, whoever it is, but more often than not, Scotland are covering the players in these spaces. So it's hard for James to play Foden in here and then get into an attacking position. So James would look to just play the ball inside back to Phillips, and it would be repetitive passes for England most of the game. Because Scotland were playing a 5-3-2 formation, what they were able to do was just double up on the sides with O'Donnell and McTominay on the right-hand side, and Tierney and Robertson on the left-hand side. But what that also did is it isolated Harry Kane. They weren't able to really find Harry Kane in these central areas where he's so good at just taking the ball into these positions, drawing the centre-back out, which allowed space for someone like Sterling or Foden to just ghost in behind. They weren't able to do that because whenever Kane was in these situations, McGregor was tight, Hanley was right behind him, McTominay was tight in here, and Tierney was as also on the other side. That meant that Kane would more often than not have to go backwards to someone like Mason Mount, who would often just come to one of these sides and look to find a pass into the attacking midfielders such as Sterling or Foden on the other side. But because Scotland guarded their sides very well, they were able to do this by Adams would drop in sometimes. O'Donnell, Adams and McTominay would just crowd out the right-hand side, whereas Tierney, McGinn and Robertson would just crowd out the left-hand side. If for whatever reason England were able to get round the back, Scotland again were very, very smart with their positioning. The three centre-backs would just all stay really tight together. One would mark Kane, so in this case Hanley. Sterling, being the smaller player, has to find his way around the back or through the centre rather than look for any aerial threat. But again, Scotland just protected it very well. They stuck really tight in here and made sure that England just couldn't get any space when a cross came in. Tierney maybe would come across just to block it off, but the others would generally be marked out of the situation. Mount hanging around on the 18-yard area, not many opportunities came back for him in these situations. And Robertson, of course, recovered quite well. So England were never really able to get into a situation where they caused problems. Another reason for that is because they had a lack of bodies inside the area. So Shaw would be quite high at times. Phillips and Rice would be just lingering around here, looking to pick up any loose balls. Mount would kind of be buzzing around the final third, looking to connect. But most of the time, it was only Kane and Sterling who were inside the penalty area, which is no good because Kane being a target man, it's okay, you can put two defenders on him. Sterling, he has to basically try to find space where there is none. And he's not the kind of player who is able to use his aerial ability. So for Scotland, it was very easy to deal with. And I think England didn't perform so well in this strategy. One of the problems as well for England was whenever they worked the ball out to the fullbacks, they were unable to really get into these advanced positions here. If James and Shaw were able to get in behind, that increases the goal scoring chances. As somebody like Foden can just hang in here, wait for a cutback, Mount can drift in to the space, but England weren't able to do that through the game. So another thing that they need to think about, how can they get more bodies into the area? Another reason England may look to go for a better centre midfielder who's more progressive is because when McGregor and the players move across, for example, somebody who's a bit better in progressive areas may be able to move into these spaces and look to really receive the ball in tighter spaces to create for the team. So it's something that I'm going to look at now. So against the Czech Republic, it's going to be a very similar situation. I think they're quite a defensive team, or at least they like to have a structure that prevents a lot of goal scoring opportunities, like we saw against Croatia, who weren't able to really disrupt the Czech Republic defence too much. So they opt for a back four with Kufal of West Ham, the right back position, Kalutska and Kalas in the centre, and Borrell on the left back. Now Souček is a defensive midfielder or box-to-box midfielder for West Ham. He will drop in here as well as Holes, so they play with two just like England. And the difference is they like to play three across the attacking midfield positions with Schick up top on his own. So what will happen is Yankto will look to come in here, and Masopust will look come in here as well. So they'll double up on a 5-2-1-1, or typically maybe a 4-5-1-1 as well, with Derrida just looking to link play with Schick as Masopust and Yankto look to get into the attacking areas when they're in transition. But generally they stick to this structure. So again, it's going to be quite difficult for England to break that down with the wide areas covered, and when England do go through the centre, I imagine that Souček and Hullers and Yankto and Masopust will look to just tighten it up a little bit with Derrida maybe pressing in these areas here. So England are going to need to use more dynamism to beat Czech Republic in this occasion. So there's a good chance that England are going to miss Mason Mount, who will be out with due to isolation. So there's a good opportunity for somebody like Grealish to come in. The only problem with this, of course, is Southgate prefers to use Grealish from the left, which is where he normally plays Sterling or Foden, depending on if he wants to switch them. So this is going to be a bit of a dilemma, I think, for him. So someone we haven't seen yet for England is Jadon Sancho. He hasn't played any minutes, and he's typically a player who likes to get in behind into these areas here. He can beat players comfortably with both feet. He can come inside, he can go outside. But one of the additions of him would be the benefit of his assist rate. So very high for Dortmund, of course. Kane will love to have his supply. Sterling's not really assisting much. I also think Sterling's been a little bit too greedy with the ball at times. So if Sancho can come in, that might be a better option for England. He has the pace, he has the dribbling technique, and that threat to really hurt the Czech Republic defence, which Kane will take advantage of that if Sancho is able to get beyond these defensive lines here and link up with James on this right-hand side. That means that the Czech Republic will have to commit more men towards him, which will free up Kane more and allow him to get involved in the game a bit more. With Grealish on the left-hand side, this would be a good addition, I think. Grealish's technical ability and his ability to find and work in spatial areas really gives him the advantage. I think somebody like Phil Foden is very good at this as well, but I just think Grealish is a little bit better at getting into the spaces and really making it count. His delivery is exceptional and he can finish from tight areas as well. Of course, another option for England would be if they were to just do away with Declan Rice in the defensive midfielder role and give that to Phillips. They do like playing with each other, so it's a bit of a sacrifice in that respect. But Phillips can cover very well. He can press. He's aggressive in the tackle. Alongside somebody like Bellingham, there might be a nice balance between two players who can actually move forward with the ball instead of having to go back with their passes all the time. That would allow somebody like Kane to just drop in here and receive, which could draw out the defender and allow Sancho or Grealish to take the spaces as well. So England might want to do that. Now, if they were to take out one of these players, such as Rice, they need to add another midfielder, of course. Somebody like Foden could come in as well and play in an attacking midfield role, similar to what role Mount played against Scotland. Foden can adapt into this role as he played there for Manchester City, so he could just float around these spaces, look to get behind if Kane receives it deep. If Kane's in these areas on his own, Foden can come to collect as well. Foden's advantage over Mount is I think he's a little bit more better in tighter spaces. Mount is very good at that too, but I think Foden just has the extra edge, dribble a little bit better past players. So if he can get into these areas here and look to draw out the likes of Souček and Holes with Grealish looking to link up, as well as Kane, who's looking to get in behind, England might be onto something more positive. And if England are struggling for goals throughout the game, what they might wish to do is throw on somebody like Marcus Rashford and look to get James a bit further forward and Shaw a bit further forward on this left-hand side. Really encourage them to attack them spaces, using Grealish in the centre. This would then allow England to really kind of direct their energy on making runs into the channels, making runs directly, and then have three players in the attack who are all capable of finishing. Rashford, Kane and Sancho could all be a little bit more deadlier than what we've seen before. So they could look to do that, add a bit of pace, a bit of trickery, and allow Grealish to be the one who just dictates play, links play, gets the ball into the wide positions, looking to make some triangle situations so that they can get in behind on either flank. So will England be able to capitalise? Will they be able to find the right balance in attack and start to really use some of their attacking abilities, attributes? Or will the Czech Republic be able to shut them off again and England have more problems as they go into the next round? So tell me what you think. Do you think England will find these advantages, or do you think they'll continue to struggle to find some good chances? Please let me know what you think. Don't forget to subscribe and hit the notification bell for more videos. Thank you for watching. See you next time.